Here we are. Final chapter that I'm going to talk to you with this week.
Yes, it is.
It's
Chapter 20.
Yes, chapter 20. And there's been this ongoing war, these political shifts, kings lifted, kings killed, kings...
Family feud.
Family feud. It's chaos in this book. And King David is now returning to his home in Jerusalem. They are recommissioning him, but there's infighting between the tribes going on, the tribe of Judah and Israel, right? They're bickering with each other.
Yep.
Okay. So, but and it starts off here. Sorry, were you going to say
No, I was going
something?
to say, years ago, they used to say, this guy we're going to read about, Sheba, son of Bichri. I remember a pastor saying, it should be Sheba, son of Bicker.
Yeah.
Because that's what they do, and they're bickering with each other all the time.
Yeah. And they live in very stretched out different areas across Israel.
Yes.
So your Judah's in the south and then the northern kingdoms way north of Jerusalem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this is pretty much the territory-wise, the bottom half of the country, the half of Judah, is really nearly as big geographically as all the other tribes together. It's much more dense and populated up in the top half of the country.
Okay, and so fill me in. Israel, in the context here, because we're going to talk about Israel and Judah and Benjamites. Israel fought for King David, or did they fight for Absalom? Or a mix of both?
I think it's a mixture of both. I mean, Absalom called them all and they all came, but I think there's still a sense of they were probably predominantly loyal to David, not to Absalom.
Okay, some fought for David.
Some would have fought for David, yes. I think they certainly, even if they were fighting for Absalom, they were only doing it because they were told to do it, whereas somehow Absalom had managed to capture the hearts of more of the people of Judah. They were his home tribe.
Okay, so Judah was for Absalom.
Predominantly for Absalom.
Okay, but somehow they're all reuniting. At least they were about to reunite.
They were about to reunite.
When David is going to be remade king.
Yep.
Yes, okay.
And now Judah's saying, no, we want him on our own. And the rest of them are going, we just got just as much right. In fact, we've got 10 times as many right as you have because there's 10 of us tribes. So there's this infighting taking place again.
Bickering, yeah.
Bickering.
Jealousy.
Sheba, son of Bichri.
Resentment, yeah. And Sheba, good for nothing, this Bible says.
Good for nothing, okay.
The message calls him a good for nothing named Sheba.
Yeah, troublemaker, it says.
A Benjamite, yeah. He blows his own ram's horn there. And he calls out and he says to everybody, we've got nothing to do with David. There's no future for us with the son of Jesse. So let's get out of here, Israel. Head for your tents.
Mm-hmm.
Mass separation.
Yep.
Which is going to lead to war.
War. Yep.
All right. So the men of Israel deserted David and they followed Sheba, son of Bickering, but the men of Judah stayed committed and they stuck with their king all the way from the Jordan to Jerusalem. Is there any relevance here to Jordan to Jerusalem?
All the way from the Jordan River to Jerusalem?
Yeah.
No, just the distance.
Just the distance?
I'm not that I'm aware of.
Does it have anything to do with the wilderness when they crossed the Jordan back in Moses' time?
Yeah, well, it is wilderness.
Seeing
From the Jordan River up through Jericho to Jerusalem is up through the wilderness, from the Dead Sea all the way up. Yeah, it
is there meant to be a parallel there or not?
There could be. Not that stands in my mind. It's just, yeah, maybe. Not that I'm aware of. Unless you found something.
No, it's just something when I read it, I was like, the Jordan to just reminded me of that.
Yeah, no, I don't. Nothing that stands to memory.
Was it not Moses? Joshua.
Yeah, they went from the Jordan, but they didn't take Jerusalem at that point.
No, they didn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Sometimes I read things into it that may not be
there.
may not be there. But maybe there is something. Maybe we need to think more about it.
Could be.
Because it's interesting to say it. But anyway, David, he goes back to Jerusalem and when he left 10 concubines to tend to his palace. And these concubines were, what word would you use there?
Assaulted
Assaulted is a good word.
by Absalom.
Yes.
Yeah. Abused by Absalom.
And Absalom, he slept with all of them. The whole town knows about it. And he did that in a way to say what was King David's was now mine.
Yep.
And David does this thing here, which I don't necessarily think this is right. And I don't think we're meant to think it's right.
No.
The way that the language is around it. So David takes these concubines and he puts them in seclusion under guard, and they live that way for the rest of their lives.
He provides for them, but that's it. It's maybe there's a sense of shame. He doesn't want them out and about, remembering that they represent his failures, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's terrible to think these women now live. They might have had a nice part of the palace, but that was it. They're basically prisoners in the palace.
Yeah. Under guard sort of says they weren't really allowed
No, they wouldn't have been
in or
outside
out.
their wing of the palace, probably.
Yeah.
So the door to the concubines' quarters would have just been guarded constantly.
Sometimes David gets it right. Sometimes he gets
Gets
it
it wrong.
very wrong.
Yeah.
And I really do think the text here is telling you this
That's
was a
not a
wrong
good thing.
decision.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, which is an interesting thing as well, because they could have just left that.
They could have. Yep, he didn't.
Because
though.
he didn't. The king could do what he wanted.
Oh,
But the
totally.
authors-
He could have reclaimed them for himself if he wanted to,
Yeah.
but he doesn't. For whatever reason, he doesn't. There's probably some political reason he reasoned away in his own head for it. But
So the king then orders Amasa, who was the head of Absalom's army.
Yep.
But David has forgiven him,
And
and he has
appointed him.
appointed him head of his army over Joab, who actually killed
Absalom.
his son.
You've done very well, Jeanie.
It just sounds so crazy.
Yes, it does.
What? So convolute.
Yeah.
The emotion and the passion and the heartbreak and the grief in this story is just so real.
Yep, it is indeed.
Okay, so he says to him, muster the men of Judah and in 3 days report back to me. And Amasa goes to do it, but he's late coming back. So David is suspicious.
Mhm.
And this actually does imply that he is betraying him,
Yes,
Right?
he could think that. Yep.
because you're never going to be late for the king.
Nope, that's right.
And if you are sick somewhere, you send a messenger.
Exactly.
Okay. And then they hear this story, well, not a story, they hear a rumor that Sheba, the son of bickering, is going to hurt us even worse than Absalom did. And so take your master's servants and hunt him down before he gets holed up in some fortress city where he can't get to him. Now, this is the exact advice that Absalom received from Ahithophel.
So it is.
Yes.
Yes, so it is.
And he turned
He
it down.
turned it down, but David knows it's the right advice.
David takes it on, yeah, and they go out. Joab, now under Abishai's command, all the best men, Joab's men and others, they leave Jerusalem to hunt down Sheba, son of Bichri, and they go after him because he's a traitor. Joab was wearing a tunic. They greet him. That's right. They find Amasa because Amasa is probably thinking that they're just coming to talk to him.
Yes.
But Joab, who is a, what do you call him before? Bloodlust-filled
Bloodlust.
person.
Yep, exactly. Bloodthirsty. Yep.
He comes out and he's wearing a tunic with a knife under him, grabs him by the beard, and
As if to greet him.
to greet him, yeah, with a kiss almost.
Yeah, almost like that.
It's
It's a friendship
sign-
thing. It's a sign of friendship.
sign of respect, isn't
Yep.
it? To greet them like that. But he then stabs him.
Which is exactly what he did to Abner, the commander of Saul's army. Exactly the same.
Exactly the same
Killed
death.
him in the same way. Brought him close as a friend and then stabbed him.
Amasa is his cousin.
Cousin. How are you, my cousin, it says here.
2 cousins here killing, yeah.
Yep.
What? Wow, the family problems going on here. So he just kills him, and second blow wasn't needed. It says
Nope,
he
that
was
time
dead.
he's dead. Yep.
So then they go after Sheba.
Mm-hmm.
One of Joab's soldiers takes up his post over the body and calls out, everyone who sides with Joab and supports David, follow Joab.
Isn't it interesting? Because Joab's been stood down as the commander. He's killed the commander in cold blood, and now he put himself back in the position of power again. Anyone who
Joab,
sides
yes.
with Joab and David.
Yes.
Not David and Joab. Joab and David.
So this is what we said before. David can't do things without Joab, and Joab can't do things without David. Like they are deeply connected.
Joab is David's kryptonite.
Yeah.
And so I was chatting with her offline. We haven't got any time to talk about it, and I'm still in the early stages of working it through. But I think there's fascinating to me that it's worth a character study into what would have happened if Jonathan, who said he would be David's David's right-hand man, had have survived instead of dying with Saul and had have been in the role of general of the army. I suspect it would have looked very different because Joab and Jonathan were 2 very different dudes.
And where can you read about Jonathan?
Jonathan in 1 Samuel.
1 Samuel.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Jonathan actually said, my father knows that you will be king and I will be beside you. Tragically, he died on Mount Gilboa when Saul was killed. But had that plan come about, had Jonathan, for whatever reason, been able to fulfill that purpose, it might have looked very different because Joab was never portrayed in a good light.
No,
He made
it's
a
not.
lot of messes. Yeah, one time last chapter he told David to wake up to himself, but generally speaking, he was bloodthirsty. He was the opposite of Jonathan. And I have to think it would have gone better for Israel. And Jonathan would have automatically handed the whole kingdom over to David. There wouldn't have been that 7 years of internal fighting for Israel. It would have looked very different if Joab had not been the king's right-hand man and it was Jonathan.
And Joab as well, he is so quick to kill people.
Yes.
Jonathan wasn't.
Jonathan was the opposite of that.
Yeah. Jonathan was ready to wait for God to give the kingdom to David, but Joab wants to take it. He wants to do whatever he can.
He wants David to be king, but ultimately he wants David to be king so he can get the benefit of David being king.
Yeah, but like reading this, he has a lot of influence.
Oh, totally.
So he is well liked by his people. And so they quickly follow him. And they follow him to this city where Sheba is. And Sheba's holding up in this place. And they're going to lay siege. They build
They start to build siege ramps, basically.
Siege ramps, yeah. And they're going to go in and have an all-out war, civil war with all these people. And then there's a wise shrewd woman who comes out. And you don't hear about women unless they do something significant.
Yeah.
So here is a unnamed woman who does something significant for the kingdom of God. And she actually has a heart for people. She doesn't want to see anybody get killed. And she says, what do you want? And Joab's like, we want Sheba dead. So she says, well, let me talk to my people and I'll arrange it. And that night, his head is thrown over.
Yep.
It sounds so brutal. His head is thrown over, yeah. Yep. And Joab does what he said he was going to do. Sometimes he can be honourable, Joab, I think.
Oh, he was honourable to his word. He was just corrupted at a moral level because of his anger and bloodthirstiness. And he just didn't have the selfless heart that David usually has.
Yeah, he does what he thinks is right for the kingdom of God. He takes action, revenge. He doesn't allow God to bring about his kingdom in his way through peace, forgiveness, acceptance, assurance, and those things.
So in that sense, he's kind of like, he's looking at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and he thinks he knows best. He knows what will work. Yeah. And sometimes he's right. Sometimes it's right, but nearly always it's at the expense of others.
Yeah, I don't think he's acting from an evil heart. He's acting in what he thinks is right.
Yeah, it seems right to him to be this way.
Yeah.
And he's unaware of the level of his own greed that gets in the way.
Yeah. But in wisdom here, he doesn't wage war. No. He blows the horn again, I think, doesn't he? And he walks away.
Yep, he leaves the town alone because all he wanted was Bikri, was Sheba. Yep.
Yeah.
So he does.
And here we have these next verses here, 23 to 26. He's now again a commander of the whole army of Israel.
Yes, that's right. David still couldn't bring himself.
No,
Crazy.
David couldn't stop him. He just allowed him to be the commander. Yep. See, David recognizes that he needs, he has to have Joab.
Yeah,
somehow.
I think Joab's got power over him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he probably thinks he's enough times in the story where he doesn't want Joab to have power, but he feels like the damage is done. I'm just going to have to work with him, and he feels manipulated by Joab. But he goes, I need him to be the commander because if I don't have him, I might not have the troops.
Or maybe he's just forgiving. Maybe not of the son, but of the son's death. But maybe he's like, well, he's family.
Yes, maybe there's a bit of that.
He is my nephew.
He's my nephew.
Who else am I going to trust?
Yeah, maybe that's it. For all his faults, he's the best of a bad bunch. He might have been that. We're left to pursue and wrestle, speculate about all those things, and they're all valid. But it does show the complexity of the relationships.
Yeah, it does.
Because Joab and Shimei, both those people, will ultimately fall foul to Solomon in the next generation because David will say to Solomon in his final charge, he'll say, Joab's not innocent. You know how to bring a bloody death to him. I couldn't do it, but you're a wise man. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And he does the same with Shimei too. He says, he cursed me that day. You know what to do about it. Which makes me think there's a weakness in David, or this fear that if he takes vengeance into his own hands, he'll make things worse. So he's prepared just to let that slide.
Or is it that he's just thinking, I don't want to be, because he killed Uriah, maybe he doesn't want to be responsible for murdering anybody anymore.
Yeah, that's right. It could be that. Yep. So it almost
he's
like he
waiting for God's
overcompensates.
time. Yeah.
Yep, I think that's true. Yep, some of that's in there.
Because David doesn't kill anybody again since Uriah, right?
True. Yeah, I think that's true in the narrative. Yeah, I don't think he does. Good call.
Yeah. So he didn't kill Saul, he didn't want to kill God's anointed. Perhaps he recognizes he has no right to kill anybody.
Yeah. Wow.
Again.
That's warrants some further thought, Jeanie.
And he's realized, well, what if I kill Joab and God says the same thing to me? There's going to be problems because you've sinned here.
Effect.
Because Joab's life wasn't yours to take.
Yeah. He's quite okay with Solomon taking it.
Yeah.
But we'll have to wait. We won't get there. That's it. That's in 1 Kings. You'll have to read that another time, folks.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else there?
No, not really. Just this is such a fascinating study of character.
Yeah.
Family politics.
Mm-hmm.
Politics at extreme levels. The monarchy,
Yep.
fighting it out. Game of Thrones.
If you can take these historical narratives, especially 1 Kings, start with Ruth. Ruth, 1 Kings, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings especially, those 5 books, they are packed full of character studies, behavioural science studies, what to do, what not to do. We can learn so much, and at the same time still recognise the scarlet thread of Christ's redemption through it all. But they are brilliantly written. We should be looking in the mirror as we read those stories and see where we measure up and where we don't.
Is that why this story's been left in there? Or can you tell me why? We mentioned it on one of the other chapters, but I just want you to tell me again, why has this been allowed to remain in the history of Israel?
I think it's there to show all the frailties and the realness of life so that we can see ourselves in the story. It's not whitewashing the story. So I love that because that shows God works with us in our weaknesses. I will add, though, it's interesting that when you get to David's story in 1 Chronicles, some of the more significant flaws are removed from the story. So there's no story about David and Bathsheba in 1 Chronicles. It's skipped completely. It's in Samuel, but it's not in Chronicles.
I didn't know that.
No, and Chronicles is written in the Second Temple period. It's a rewrite written hundreds of years later and for a different purpose. It's written not as a character study narrative in Israel. It's written retrospectively to look back and then look forward to the messianic figure. So it's written, they write David in a more whitewashed, not perfect, but a much more cleaner perspective than the narrative of Samuel is, because it's trying to set this David figure up as a Messiah-like figure that would bring them hope for the future Messiah. So it's written under a different motive and a different reason. Samuel puts it all in there.
So this is more of a historical record.
Yeah, I guess so. They're both historical records. It's just they deliberately deselect and remove some of the more darker moments of David's life from the Chronicles account.
And talk to me here about God. Talk to me about God, Pastor Ron.
How long have you got?
Yeah. Just the idea that David was raised to be this king and then he's taken from his kingdom. Should we, off this story, learn that God is always restoring us to his purposes, his planned purpose in our life, if we allow him to do so?
That's the big one. If he always is, but he will not violate our will. So he has grafted us into his vine, but it's up to us to stay grafted into the vine, which David did. He kept coming back to God.
Because many psalms were written out of this, and they're beautiful psalms. Do you remember any? I think
Psalm 51, Psalm 18 is going to actually come up in the very next week. 2 Samuel 22 is actually a complete repeat of Psalm 18. So yeah, a lot of psalms are written about David's life during this time.
So even though it's not mentioned that he sought of the Lord, inquired of the Lord in this, he actually goes back and writes about it.
Writes about it, yeah. Sees God at work.
And praises God,
Yeah, that's right. So he was trying to do the right thing, even though he lost his way a little bit and was a flawed character like all of us. God was faithful. He doesn't expect us to be perfect. What he's looking for is a heart that is devoted to him. And if he can get a heart devoted to him, he can work with the rest.
That's what I learned from this story, that even though we get it so wrong, we do wrong things, we hurt people and are hurt by people, God will always welcome us back.
Yeah, that's it. That's the narrative of David, 100%. Great, Jeanie.
No further statements, questions or anything. No.
All right. Thanks for being with us this week, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bible. Wait, what? Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And you can also find us on all the socials. Just search The Bible. Wait, what? And to find out more about our church, just search C3 Camden, C3 Picton, or C3 Thirroul on the web or on the socials. Thanks for being with us today, and we look forward to talking to you on the next episode of The Bible. Wait, what?